Some of the most powerful forces in the world are the ones you will never see. They leave no fingerprints, they make no announcements, and yet entire civilizations move because of them. History remembers kings, generals, and billionaires, but history rarely remembers the silent hands that quietly shaped the board they were playing on. Think about it. The most powerful operating system in your phone runs silently in the background. The deepest ocean currents move entire continents of water without ever touching the surface. So what if the same rule applies to power itself? What if the greatest systems controlling our world are designed to remain invisible? Tonight, we explore the quiet architecture of hidden power.
In every era of human history, power has worn many masks. Some were loud, crowned with gold, surrounded by armies and ceremonies designed to make their authority impossible to ignore. But others were far quieter. They did not sit on thrones or stand before crowds. Instead, they moved silently through institutions, beliefs, and invisible structures that shaped the behavior of entire societies. The most effective systems of power rarely demanded attention. In fact, they worked best when nobody noticed them at all. Like the vast roots of a giant tree buried deep beneath the soil, they quietly held everything together while the visible world above believed the tree stood on its own. Imagine sitting in a dark theater, watching a puppet show unfold on stage. The puppets speak, fight, and compete for control of the story. To the audience, they appear alive, full of personality and intention. The entire drama seems to revolve around their actions. But just above the stage, hidden in darkness, thin strings stretch upward into unseen hands that guide every movement. The audience rarely looks up. Their attention stays fixed on the performance below. And that, perhaps, is the secret behind every effective system of influence. As long as the audience remains focused on the puppets, the hands controlling the strings remain comfortably invisible. Nature itself quietly teaches this same lesson. The most powerful forces in our world are often the ones we cannot see. The wind bends forests without ever revealing its form. Gravity holds entire galaxies together without a visible thread connecting them. Even within our own bodies, the brain, the most powerful system we possess, operates silently, processing billions of signals without our conscious awareness. The deeper you look into nature, the clearer the pattern becomes. Power does not always announce itself. In fact, the strongest forces often move through the world quietly, shaping everything around them while remaining completely unseen. Modern society appears to be organized around visible centers of authority. Governments make decisions, corporations build industries, public figures stand at the front of the stage speaking loudly about change and leadership. Yet beneath these visible layers lies something far more complex. Hidden networks of economics, technology, culture, and infrastructure quietly determine the boundaries within which these visible leaders operate. These deeper systems influence what choices are possible, what actions are rewarded, and what outcomes become likely. They rarely appear in headlines or speeches, yet they quietly determine the rules of the entire game being played above them. Consider how ideas travel through a society. They move through classrooms, conversations, stories, media, and traditions passed down across generations. Slowly, these ideas settle into the background of everyday thinking. Over time, they become invisible frameworks that guide how people interpret reality itself. What once began as a simple belief eventually transforms into something much stronger, an assumption so familiar that few people ever think to question it. When ideas reach this stage, they become incredibly powerful. Because once an idea becomes invisible, it quietly shapes millions of decisions without anyone realizing where the influence began. There is a simple reason why the most sophisticated systems of influence prefer to remain unseen. Visibility invites resistance. The moment power becomes obvious, people begin asking questions. They start examining motives, challenging authority, and searching for alternatives. But when influence blends seamlessly into the background of daily life, it no longer appears as control at all. Instead, it feels like the natural order of things, like gravity or weather, simply part of the environment everyone lives inside. And when power becomes part of the environment itself, it becomes extraordinarily difficult to challenge.
Think about the devices we carry every day. A smartphone appears simple on the surface, a glowing screen, a few icons, a swipe of a finger. Yet beneath that smooth interface lies an immense invisible architecture of algorithms, servers, data centers, and code operating across continents. Billions of calculations occur every second behind the scenes. Most users will never see any of it. They interact only with the small, visible layer designed for them. But the true complexity, the real machinery, remains hidden beneath the surface, quietly shaping what information appears, what connections form, and what choices are presented. Language itself may be one of the most powerful invisible systems ever created. Words are more than simple sounds or symbols. They shape how people categorize the world around them. A single phrase repeated often enough can slowly reshape how millions of people interpret reality. Over time, certain words begin to frame entire conversations before they even begin. They guide attention towards some ideas while quietly pushing others into the shadows. In this way, language becomes an invisible architecture of thought, building boundaries around imagination without anyone ever noticing the walls. Throughout history, the most effective strategies of influence rarely relied on direct control. Instead of forcing people to behave in certain ways, these systems focused on shaping the environment around them. Incentives were designed carefully. Opportunities appeared in specific places. Obstacles quietly formed in others. Gradually, people began making choices that seemed completely voluntary, even though the conditions guiding those choices had already been arranged. When influence operates this way, it does not push people forward. It simply designs the path, and people naturally walk along it. Psychologists sometimes refer to this phenomenon as the architecture of influence. When a system can shape perception, attention, and emotion, it gains a level of power far deeper than simple authority. It no longer needs commands, rules, or punishments. Instead, it adjusts the environment in subtle ways that guide behavior naturally. Like a river shaping the landscape over time, the influence becomes gradual but powerful. And because people feel as though they are making their own decisions, the system remains invisible, even as it quietly directs the flow of countless choices. This is why the most enduring systems of power often present themselves as neutral or inevitable. They appear to be simple facts of life, systems that have always existed and always will. Once a structure achieves this level of acceptance, questioning it begins to feel unusual. People rarely challenge something that seems permanent. In fact, they often begin defending it themselves. At that point, the system no longer needs to enforce its authority. Society begins maintaining the structure automatically, ensuring its continuation without even realizing it. Interestingly, invisibility does not always mean secrecy. Many powerful systems operate in plain sight. Their mechanisms are not hidden behind locked doors or classified documents. Instead, they are woven so deeply into everyday routines that most people simply stop noticing them. Like a fish swimming through water, completely unaware of the ocean surrounding it. The environment becomes so familiar that it fades into the background of awareness, even though it continues shaping every movement within it. The paradox of invisible power is that it grows stronger the less attention it receives. Attention acts like light, illuminating structures that once operated in darkness. Questions create cracks in assumptions. Curiosity reveals connections that once seemed unrelated. But systems designed for invisibility depend on something very fragile. Quiet acceptance. As long as people move through their daily lives without examining the deeper patterns around them, these systems continue operating smoothly beneath the surface. Yet occasionally, history produces moments when the hidden structures briefly reveal themselves. A financial collapse, a technological breakthrough, a social movement powerful enough to disrupt the usual order of things. During these moments, the curtain lifts just slightly. People begin noticing connections they had never seen before. They start questioning systems that once appeared stable and permanent. For a brief period, the invisible machinery behind society becomes visible, if only for a moment. And in those rare moments, something remarkable happens. People begin asking entirely different questions. Instead of focusing only on visible leaders and dramatic events, they start searching for the deeper patterns guiding those events. They look beyond the headlines and wonder about the structures shaping the outcomes. It is in these moments that awareness begins to spread, slowly revealing the complex networks that quietly influence the direction of entire societies. But systems rarely remain exposed for long. They adapt, they evolve. When attention begins to reveal too much, new layers form to restore the balance. Narratives shift, structures reorganize. What was once visible slowly fades back into the background again. The machinery continues operating just beneath the level of everyday awareness, where it is far more stable and far less likely to be challenged. This pattern has repeated itself throughout history, again and again. Power rises into view for a brief moment, then transforms into something more subtle. Each generation believes it understands the forces shaping its world. Yet deeper systems continue forming quietly beneath the surface. New technologies appear, new institutions emerge, and once again the invisible architecture of influence begins rebuilding itself. So the question may not be whether invisible systems exist. Every complex society naturally creates them over time. The more interesting question is whether people develop the awareness to notice the patterns revealing their presence. Because even the most hidden systems leave traces, small signals scattered across events, decisions, and outcomes. Those who learn to recognize these patterns begin seeing the world very differently. Once you begin looking beneath the surface, the world slowly transforms. Events that once seemed random begin connecting in unexpected ways. Decisions made in distant places ripple outward through invisible networks. Structures that once appeared chaotic begin revealing quiet patterns guiding their direction. It becomes clear that the visible world is only part of the story, the surface of something far deeper. And perhaps this is the final mystery. The most powerful systems in the world remain invisible, not because they must hide, but because most people never think to look beyond what is immediately visible. The surface is loud, dramatic, and full of distractions. Beneath it, however, quieter forces continue shaping the future. And sometimes, the greatest shift in power begins with something very simple: the moment someone finally decides to look deeper.